So I want to very shortly introduce our association. So first of all, a little historical insight. The European Choral Association is the result of a merger between two European associations. One was called Europa Cantat, or at the very beginning even European Federation of Young Choirs. The other one was called Arbeitsgemeinschaft Europäischer Chorverbände, which was a German word because it was a German-speaking association, AGEC, and we decided in the 90s that it was not healthy to have two major European choral associations and that we wanted to speak with one voice, so we decided to merge into one. And you see at the bottom the roots of the associations, and especially of the European Choral Association of Europa Cantat, of that side, is that conductors who were conducting youth choirs in the 1950s and who had themselves been soldiers during the Second World War, they met at a youth camp and they said, we want to find a way that our singers will not want to go to war ever. And their ideal was to put those young singers together for 10 days, eating together, sleeping together, singing with each other, which was very unusual at the time. Normally at festivals, choirs would sing for each other, but not in ateliers or workshops with each other. So they said, if we do that, after 10 days, the young people will have an address book full of friends in all kinds of countries, and they will not want to go to war against their friends. It was a very idealistic, but also very nice idea at the beginning, and the people who had this idea were people who had been fighting on the two sides of the border, and who were optimistic that this could be reached. They were from countries like France and Germany and Belgium, where nowadays there is no problem, so in a way their idealism was not completely wrong. But of course we have conflicts, unfortunately, in the world between other countries still, and also new conflicts coming up. So this purpose in a way is still there, that we want to try to contribute to peace and tolerance through singing, because we believe that singing has the potential to help. The second aim was to disseminate European choral music, to say we want to learn what European music, what choral music is sung in other European countries, and maybe with a conductor from that country, so that we really get the original. And this idea is still in our festivals nowadays. So this is the official text. We are ourselves a network, and I will explain why, and we belong to all kinds of international and European networks for music, for culture. So we are trying to connect, that's also going back to our discussion, beyond the choral sector as well, and to look, as we say in German, over the rim of our plate, to look at what other people are doing and to connect to them. We ourselves are a network. Until 2021, we were a network of organizations, choirs, families, and individuals. And we realized that it was a bit difficult to serve the needs of an umbrella organization in the country on the one hand and an individual person on the other hand. So at some point we decided that the European Choral Association would only have organizations as members, but that shows some of the examples we have. So we have around 60 organizations from 35 countries nowadays, and different types of organizations that I will jump over. And we offer all kinds of advantages to the organizations that are our members. And for the individuals at the choirs, we don't want to, lose them. So we said we still have a home for individuals and choirs who want to support us. And this home are our friends. So it's the association called Friends of the European Choral Association, where on the one hand you can help fundraising for the association, and on the other hand you can meet other people who, like you, think that what the European Choral Association does is great, and you want to talk to them, you want to network with them, and you get invited to all kinds of networking activities if you are a member, and there are a few members of the Friends also here in the room who have experienced this. I will also jump over the details. Maybe one thing that can be interesting is that the Friends of the European Choral Association also have the Noël Minet Fund under it, which is a fund from a donor who gave us a certain amount of money to give scholarships to young people from different countries who cannot afford to do a training by themselves. So they get some financial help to be able to go to a conducting masterclass or an academy or to the Leading Voices Festival or something like that. So it's for young people under 30. At the moment, the focus is on Central Eastern European or Southeastern European countries that have more financial difficulties, but it's not exclusive. We also sometimes have others who, yes, and there's a quote from somebody from Lithuania that some people in the room know. I will just go back a little bit to a study we made, and I brought some yellow papers because I realize that still many people don't do that. Sometimes I ask, but it's a bit mean to do that in a big circle, is do you know how many people in Europe sing together with others regularly? And in Europe, it's even easier than in other parts of the world where they actually normally don't know and don't have any figures. And you find this flyer here if you are interested in more details, because then we did a study and we found out that it's 4.5% of the population. Now, you may think that is not a lot. But for example, in France, there are 2.5% hunters, and they have a huge influence on the government in their country and get a lot of rules done for themselves. And you have many more singers, but the singers don't manage to do that. But also, we have looked at statistics of people actively playing football. And there are obviously more people watching football than listening to choral concerts, but there are fewer people actively playing football than actively singing in Europe, in many European countries. And that is something that we are often surprised about because we think that football is the king everywhere. Why have we done this? Because it helps us show to the people that choral music is not only, as I was once told at the European Union, a niche art form, just a tiny subsection of music, but choral music is actually something that concerns a lot of people across Europe, and therefore is something that is important and should be supported. There is my colleague who did the study at the time. He said, in the European Union, we have 22.5 million people. Now, these figures are very abstract. So to make it concrete, imagine people holding hands from the North Pole to the South Pole. That would represent 22.5 million people. And I already said in the introduction that we started using the term collective singing because we think it's more inclusive. I will now have a quick look at our events. And I also brought the freshly printed program of 2025. There's a QR code that leads you to the website where you can actually download a brochure with many more details on these events. But then the flyer is easier to carry and lighter. And we organize or co-organize events for different target groups, for choirs and vocal ensembles, for conductors and vocal leaders, sometimes also for composers and creators. There's an academy in Italy, for example, every 2 years for composers where they have a choir there with which they can test their compositions. But also at Leading Voices, we have offers for conductors. We have offers for music educators or music teachers, and also sometimes for managers, like the Young Event Management Program, where you can learn management by learning on the job, so to speak, in a festival. These events are events that we invented as European Choral Association, or even one of our predecessors, and that are regularly happening in different countries, and we cooperate with another organization in the country. We never organize something alone in another country because we think this is not very smart. The people in that country know better than us what are the local conditions. They know their choir world better, so we always cooperate with a national or regional organization for these events. And I have been asked, there was no Europa Cantat Festival this year, for those who have been following the Europa Cantat Festival, because we would have had to take the decision about it during the pandemic. And during the pandemic, most communes, most cities weren't able to promise any money for an event that would happen at a time where maybe we would no longer have a pandemic. Because we normally have to decide these things 3 years in advance. So you calculate back 2021, we were still full in the pandemic. On the other hand, we do almost know where we will be in 2027, so I can say that there will be a festival in 2027, maybe in a slightly different format. Then we have a junior festival for children and youth choirs, and the next one will be in Girona, in Catalonia, in 26. We have leading voices that I will come back to in a moment in Tallinn. We have the Euro Choir that from next year will be called European Youth Choir, and that will actually happen in Valencia. And I would like to actually speak to our delegation from Valencia about this after this session for a moment, if you want. And we also are one of the partners of the World Youth Choir, which also goes to a different country every year and just by coincidence happens to take place in Catalonia next year. And this year they are still going to do a big tour in Germany with the German National Youth Orchestra and Beethoven and Tandun program. So then we have events under the label like the event where you are now, which means we did not invent it, but it's similar to our events. It has the same philosophy. However, we cannot guarantee, for example, the quality of organization or things like that. We do check the music program normally, but that's it. So you find the printed program 24 and 25. And then actually in every brochure, you will have a separate page where you can see especially what are the activities for conductors and vocal leaders. So if that's what you are, it makes it easier for you to identify which of the events are interesting for you. And I mentioned before the leading voices, and you also find flyers there. This is a new activity we invented in 2022. And it's something similar to a symposium or a conference. So it's actually a meeting place for professionals. It's not meant for choirs. You can hear choirs there, but selected choirs. But the purpose is for people, and not only professionals in the sense of people who are living from that, because we talked about that fact that we also have amateur conductors, but people who are working with others in the field of collecting singing. Whether they are paid for it or not, and whether they have gone to university or about that or not is not our issue. But so it's conductors and vocal leaders, composers and arrangers, it's also music educators, it's managers, it's voice teachers, everybody who from some perspective deals with collective singing. And it's a program of workshops and lectures, practical workshops. The lectures are more theoretical, but also experimental labs where you can try out something completely new and crazy and you don't know in advance if there will be a result. There will be master classes and there will be concerts with invited choirs. And the very special thing next year is that the event will start as an opening concert with the song celebration, with the Estonian song celebration concert. If you have never heard about this, Google it. It means that in this sound shell that you see on the picture there on the right, you may have up to 24,000 people singing together and singing together well and in tune and correctly. It's I have experiences twice already. It's an unforgettable experience if you have never been there. So we will do this as an opening concert, and then we will have 3 days of educational program. Yeah, here you see the sound shell very well. At our Europacantat Festival in Tallinn, we also sang there with only 7,000 people. And the funny thing is that it looked full with 7,000 people. So we were wondering how the people have to stand when it's 24,000 in the same space and they are really standing like this. I heard in Lithuania last week that in Estonia they actually can't sit down during the concert when they are all the 24,000 people because there's no space for that. But it's an amazing event. I wanted to spend a little bit more time also on online material that we have available. And we know we talked, some people cannot afford to travel to Estonia for this event, even if they would love to. Maybe you have students or friends who say, I can't afford to travel, but I would still like to learn something and to get new input. So apart from the Conductors app you just heard about, the Conductors tool, we did a festival in 2021, which was in the middle of the pandemic, so we were not actually allowed to do a festival as we wanted to. But the government allowed us to use the money for something else. And like 1 month before the festival, I think, we decided to produce an online TV program called ECTV. And we produced 70 hours of online content during the week of the festival. And the archive is completely available for free, because at the time, that's what we were doing. And I think for conductors, it's especially interesting to look at the so-called Pulse program, which is actually specifically offers for conductors on conducting techniques or things like that, but also maybe on the brain and how is this connected to conducting and music. And then we had the discovery ateliers, which is more like repertoire sessions where you can discover a new repertoire that you may not know. And then we also had some online open singing, which was quite a new thing for us, that you can watch if you have some fun in this. And we have proper reading sessions as well. So the discovery ateliers were more about unusual types of singing, let's say, and the reading sessions more about discovering repertoire from different countries. And then when we did the first Leading Voices conference, we had some panel discussions, so like we had today. We do not have the workshops and the lectures available online for free, but the panel discussions, because they had no musical contents, we were able to share them online. And you see we have different topics, and they are all available on our YouTube channel, and you can still watch them. And we have regularly organized webinars, which we also record and also make available online on our YouTube channel. And they can be on very, very different topics. Like this was Robert Hollingworth saying when choral music isn't enough. This was actually about multimedia and things like that, how to mix. But we also had something about, I think Merzi is not in the room at the moment, but about Merzi's project, Choirs for Ecocide Law. So if you want to know more about it, you can watch this, or about how to choose your repertoire wisely. So all kinds of topics. We also had one recently about fair pay, which is a topic we have started tackling because we are members of the International Music Council, and we say in our strategy, in our statutes even, I think, we subscribe to the 5 music rights of the International Music Council, which includes the right to access music, to learn music, but also the right to receive fair remuneration, as they call it. And fair remuneration means fair pay. And we realized that at our own events, we weren't actually very good with fair pay, because we, for 20 years, offered the same fee to conductors and felt that maybe we should check what would be a fair pay for an international event, because obviously a fair pay in Serbia is different from a fair pay in Norway, because the living costs are different and the average income is different. But when you're doing a European or international event, you can't really say, I'm going to pay the Norwegian more because the Norwegian needs more money to live, and I'm going to pay the Turkish person less because they don't need so much to survive. That's very dangerous, so we don't do that. We also don't say, Mr. So-and-so, he is a professor of choral conducting, so he's a much better conductor than Mr. So-and-so. We find that very dangerous as well, because you don't know where to draw the line between super famous and not so famous. So the principle at our events is that everybody gets the same pay. And then we try to look at some Western European, Southern European countries and say, what's the standard there? And to make a proposal of what we think would be fair pay for example, a workshop at an event like this. Now we know that maybe if the singing week is happening in Bulgaria or Serbia, they cannot really pay the same, but at least it makes organizers think about it. And we do have the first events who have decided to adapt these fair pay guidelines. So if you want to get more money, you can watch the webinar and download our guidelines and then give them to the next organizers who invite you and say, I think that's what I should be paid. Why did we do that? Because many people didn't know what they can actually ask for. Also many composers didn't know what they can ask for a commissioned work. So we also have a guideline for compositions, and many festivals didn't know what is a fair payment for a commissioned choral piece. So that's why we think it's also interesting. So we find a playlist, and as I said, if I share the PDF, you will find the link to the playlist to all those webinars. And one other thing, we have as a vision that we want the world, or everybody in the world, to experience the benefits of singing. And we as choral musicians, as choral people, we are convinced of these benefits. I sang in the choir very early in my life. I know that when I had trouble at home, going to the choir rehearsal was like an island, and I came home totally relaxed. After coming out of home very stressed, this is something we have all experienced. But when we're trying to explain this to people who are not choral singers, it's not enough to say, well, I know that this is the case, or I believe that this is the case, which is even worse. But we don't actually need to do that, because there is research that proves this. There is a lot of research, but we realize that the research is everywhere and we don't know how serious it is. So we made a study about research to see how serious it is. And we picked the best studies in a curated list where you can point people that should support your activities and say, look, here it says, if my students will sing, they will be better in mathematics. Or if my students will sing, they will have better social skills. They will have less mental health problems. They will actually have a better immune system, etc., etc. And then you have the hard facts, and many decision makers want hard facts. This material is available on our website, including a set of postcards in 21 languages that you are allowed to print and distribute at events with the graphics that you can see a little bit on there. And if there is a language missing, you are welcome to add a language. Then very fast, the last chapter. Now, I talked only about the European Choral Association until now, but there are obviously also other associations in the world that are doing something in the field of choral music and for conductors and vocal leaders and choirs and ensembles. And just in case you don't know them, we are ourselves members of the Choral Festival Network, and I always say it's a kind of fair label for competitions and festivals. Why a fair label? Because if you want to become a member, you have a commission that analyzes your event, not necessarily on the musical quality, but on transparency and on fairness. So for example, I once got an invitation to a competition with one jury member. And I said an international competition that has a jury that consists of one person cannot be a fair competition. You need minimum 3, better 5 jury members to be a fair competition. So this is one of the things they look at. But they also look if in the small print you see if you have to pay your hotel through the organizers, if you can organize your own hotel, and all those things as well. And what will be the conditions for singing, where will you be singing, etc. Very useful website if you want to plan your trips. There are also some other organizations like the European Grand Prix competitions that also have a certain quality as a minimum in their competitions. And then there are other organizations where I will not say anything about the quality because I cannot judge it. But they can still be interesting for choirs wanting to travel and sing. We also have the member organization. So when you're planning to travel to another country and you're looking for a partner choir, I often get those messages. Let's say you say, I want to travel to Belgium. And I will say, oh, you have a youth choir. There is the Vlaamse Federatie van Jonge Koren. They actually know a lot of youth choirs in Flanders. Why don't you contact them and ask them how to find a Flemish choir that you can exchange with or visit or plan a concert with? So that's also a useful tool. And we have a calendar of choral events where anybody who is organizing something for choirs or conductors or composers can put in an event. So we give no quality label there, but it can still be helpful if you say, I would like to travel to France in July and I want to know what's happening in France in July. And finally, there is an International Federation for Choral Music. We are founding members of this International Federation. And as I said before, Jan is vice president. So if during the week you have some more questions about them, I will very quickly show you what are their main things. They organize a World Symposium on Choral Music, and you actually see Jan and Maria, who is also here. And the last one was in Turkey in 2023. And whenever I meet young Turkish conductors now, it's quite amazing for me because they say this symposium changed our choral world in Turkey. It had a huge impact on the choral world in Turkey. And we cannot tell you yet where the next one will be, but it should be in 2026. You see some impressions, very diverse music choirs from all over the world and different styles. Then there is an activity that everybody can join for free. You don't need to travel. That's World Choral Day, the second Sunday in December. You can decide to join this initiative, have your choir added to a website. There is a little text that you will be asked to print or read and maybe a song to perform in your program. And you can have a look at that. Then they print or actually they now digitally produce an international choral magazine. And I think I forgot a slide. They also have a composition competition, and the next one will be in 2025-26, which is also very interesting for composers. And finally, this is a tool I recommend to conductors and managers if you have never used it. It's the Musica International Database. And I cannot show you all the details now because it would take too long, but you can, for example, say, I want to do a concert about flowers, and you can put in the keyword flower, and you can also say, I want 3-part songs, 4-part songs, equal voice only, short, difficult for the choir, easy for the choir, difficult for the conductor, easy for the conductor. You can choose the period, and then the program tells you all the scores that fit your search criteria. And not for all the scores, but for many scores, you will also find recordings, sound files for the language, translations of the texts, and information about the composer. So I actually also use it often to write concert programs. So you go there, you write flowers, for example, and then you get this list. You also see where you can buy the scores, and you get all those informations about it. And then sometimes at the top you can see you can view the score, an excerpt of it, the text, the pronunciation, the translation. You can subscribe to our newsletter if you want to keep up with what we're doing, or you can follow us on social media as well. And I think that's the end of my presentation, which is exactly on time, I think.